Well, we'll go ahead and get started. I'm Chuck Hanagan, and they asked me, I gave a program about a year and a half ago at the Night at the Museum program at the Rocky Ford Museum. It was the first time we kind of put something together. And the Smithsonian exhibit across the hall, Crossroads, Changing America. They asked me if I'd give this presentation here. I want to thank the Southeast Colorado Creative Partnership and the Otero Junior College Humanities for hosting us. And thank you guys all for coming out, listening to me for an hour or a little bit longer. I'm not a historian or much of anything like that. I've gathered up a lot of stuff. I grew up in a household where my parents, my dad, his family had been in Swink forever, and they kind of reminisced and talked, and we had lots of stuff from Swink. We've collected and gathered over the years, so this is part of what our family's put together over a lot of years. So when I first started collecting stuff, especially on the Swink Sugar Factory, I didn't really realize how instrumental the factory was to the creation of Swink, and kind of where our timelines ran. To give you a little perspective, Lahana, in 1875 it was founded. In 1879 it basically became a hub for the Santa Fe Railroad. In 1881 they incorporated the town, and 1881 was the first edition of the Tribune, Lahana Tribune. Rocky Ford, 1871, George W. had the town north of where it is now. In 84 they moved it into town along the railroad tracks. 1899 they started pushing for a sugar factory. George W. Swink was really instrumental. He knew that beets could be raised in the valley. He brought in seed. He pushed for the start of the beet industry. In 1901, the American Beet Sugar Factory was built in Rocky Ford. So, you know, we're looking, well, in Sugar City, the town was platted in 1899, and National Sugar Company opened, and at that time it was one of the, I think the second plant in Colorado to be built and open. So, you know, we're running 1870s, 1880s for other towns, and if you look at Swink in 1900, there wasn't one. Swink did not exist at that point in time. If you look back, there's history. It's all referred to as Fairmont, and Swink is used, but Swink was referred to as a station. Basically, it was a beet dump on the railroad. Fairmont was the area basically south of Swink, and so when they did start the town, they originally referred to it as Fairmont, and apparently the Postal Service had too many Fairmonts across the country, and they weren't willing to add another one, so they made them choose another name. Somewhere there's a writing that talks about how they came up with Swink, and that they knew they were having a meeting, they had to come up with another name, and George Swink was coming to the meeting, but he was late, and so they named the town of Swink after him. It's kind of like showing up to a meeting late. You're the president of the board, or, you know. So anyway, don't really know how it happened, but Swink replaced the name of Fairmont. Until then, Swink was basically just a beet dump, a station on the railroad. Late November of 1905, the American Beet Sugars, they're up and operating in Rocky Ford. There's beet dumps all up and down the Arkansas or the Santa Fe Railroad. They're hauling beets to the Rocky Ford plant. They approach producers out in the Holbrook Valley and say, if you guys will plant 1,500 acres of beets, we'll put in a railroad and a road to you. And so there's a few guys from Holly that had bought land surrounding Swink or in Swink, and they went to, there's a meeting, this talks about the meeting in Mennonite, at the Mennonite Church in Cheraw, and there was about 200 producers gathered there, and they came away with a pledge of 8,000 acres for a factory at Swink. And the Holly Sugar said they would build a railroad from Swink, 85 miles through Holbrook, north of the Arkansas River, clear down McClave, Hartman, clear into Holly. So they chose Holly Sugar over the American Beet Sugar Company. Basically that led to the beginning of Swink, and there's pictures of this in the town hall of Swink, and these are actually out of the Colorado Historical Society. They've got them online. But this is the sale of the Swink lots, February 21st, 1906. And they had a big barbecue, and looks like they ate everything and had a heck of a party. Talks about they served, there were about 2,500 people came to Swink. They brought brought them in by train, let them out. They had barbecue, 3 cows, started the auction, and the first lot brought $1,125 by H.W. Potter, and he was a former sheriff of Otero County. After that, there was some bought and retained by Holly Sugar. Basically, in this article, and this is out of the Lafayette News, February 24th, 1906. A lot of things I've been able to get, I go back and there's a historical newspaper society in Colorado, and they're adding newspapers every day. They add more and more papers, and they're really easily searchable. You can find your history on everything in that thing. It's really neat. So I know some dates. I put some keywords in, and I get a lot of articles on different things. And you can see the same article went out on the wire because it's printed fairly close to the same verbiage on different newspapers across the country. But they do take some liberties sometimes. But like this one, this talked about the factory. The grading had already been done. There was 300 to 400 workmen already living in tents, and they're thinking that the town's going to be thriving of at least 1,500 inhabitants. I think the population of Swink right now is like 150, so we're going to get there. This is off that picture before, and it's when you zoom in, it gets really bad. But the one on the other side, that's a town they said it's a town office. And in the middle, that high dark spot there, that's a beet dump. And then over here, there's a little shack, and it's the depot. And that's all the Swink, basically, when Swink started in February. So, February 26th, they raised a flag, breaking ground for the factory. And they began construction. And think of I want to keep track of the timeline, because in November, December, we're talking, they say, okay, you grow the beets, we'll build a factory. In February, they're auctioning off lots, and they got guys living in tents. Here, they're started building. That building there that you see being built, the piles of bricks, they talk about 2 million bricks being brought by wagon. I can't find the names McNean in the Lahana bricks, but I'm assuming that those probably came from Lahana. And they were very carefully piled at the construction sites. You can see all the foundations. A lot of these buildings have, the walls in them are 3 layers deep in bricks. But that building is actually the administration building, same building here. If you go by today, it's still standing there. It's the apartments that are right there on the end of Sugar Road. So the warehouses, you can see them being built. They're storage for the finished bagged sugar. This is where Clean Valley's running today. This looking west, and this is in June, so we're not quite 4 months into construction yet. They've got the superintendent's home, the business office. They've got foundations going in, and you can kind of look. Everything's pretty open. This is about the same date looking east, and this is from where basically kind of where the end of Clean Valley is, looking east from there, and you can see the Arkansas River right there in the edge of the picture. You can't see that today. It was not that close to that area, and then just see how open everything is. That's one of the things that's neat to see about a lot of these old pictures that were taken out looking. The views and the areas have dramatically changed. Here's the looking back toward, that's to the east again. That's one of the big warehouses they're finishing up. Take note of the 2 guys standing there with those long steel rods going up in the air. We'll see them again here in a little bit. These are the boiler house and the stock and lime kilns. So they're all on site, ready to be hoisted into the building. Those bolt anchors that we saw a little bit ago, those are basically part of the sugar factory foundation, or the sugar smokestack foundation. And there's some, in the documentation, it talks about them being over 30 feet deep in the ground. So there's kind of an idea of February 28th, we're well into construction. Does anybody have a guess at how high that smokestack is?
About 230 feet.
You know, you've got a little insider information there.
I got it from you.
Yes. You know, it's 230 feet, circumference 62, walls are 3 foot 4 inches, and that picture over there, you can see 2 really stout guys. They got a lot of guts. They have the best view in the house. And actually that smokestack, I don't remember how long ago that was. It was made a historical landmark by the county, designated. So this is top of the diffusion battery. It's part of the process of refining the sugar. You can see that was a lot of steel and construction going on there. The last crystallizer being lifted into place, that's September 15th. So we're seven months into this, and that they've been putting a tube under the highway by my house for 90 days. So this is 7 months after they began. The granulators, again, that shows some of the superstructure on the sugar factory there. And so, you know, this is September. So we're just a little over 6 months in. They're kind of rolling. And this is a newspaper article that went out and said the factory located at Swink represents an approximate expenditure of $1.5 million. It's equipped with the most modern and up-to-date sugar making machinery. and grinds each day of the campaign about 1,600 tons of sugar beets. The campaign begins about October 1st and lasts about 100 days, during which several 100,000 bags of sugar are produced and shipped to all parts of the United States. The industry furnishes a market to farmers over the entire Arkansas Valley for their beet crops. On the beet pulp and refuge, reuse of molasses, which are principal byproducts, several thousand head of cattle are fattened and shipped to eastern markets. You are cordially invited to stop by Swink and visit the plant. Competent guides will be furnished who will explain the processing of sugar. So when they opened up, they were excited, they shared, but it was quite a accomplishment. And that's a postcard. I've got a whole stack of postcards. Seems like back then they took a postcard of every neat field accomplishment, a big steer, a fat hog, and sent a picture. You could write your notes on the back, but a lot of it did well to document a lot of the buildings and things we have. This is out of the Lahana Tribune. December 1st, 2,500 people attended the formal opening of the new Swink Sugar Factory on Thanksgiving Day. Special trains were run over to Santa Fe from Trinidad, Fountain, and Holly, and made available of the low rate and one fare for the round trip. Valley Railroad from the Hobart country, and coaches were crowded to the Sun Whales with a happy crowd. The day was one of those ideal for Indian summer days, for which the Arkansas Valley is noted in midwinter. It talks about less than 10 months ago, there was one store, a blacksmith shop, and one dwelling in Swink. Today there's a population of 800 souls, the largest and best equipped sugar beet factory in the world, costing over $1 million, 35 residencies, 12 stores, 100 tents, many new houses in the course of construction, a mayor, a town board, town marshal, and a new railroad which crosses the railroad near the factory and penetrates the rich farming territory of the north from Holbrook east as far as Holly, a distance of 60 miles. A magic wand wielded by W.M. Wiley, president of the Holly Construction Company, achieved these results in a space of less than 10 short months. And that's what always amazed me is you couldn't do the environmental impact study today to build a factory like that. So, they just thought they could do it, and they did. Talks about there's going to be, basically it took about 350 men to run the factory. They talk about employing up to 1,500 employees indirectly with on the farms and stuff like that. They said that 7,500 acres of beets were to be harvested, which means more than 120 tons will be made into sugar. For this first crop, farmers received $600,000, and $100,000 more will be paid to laboring men. So it just talked about how, it was definitely a huge asset to, it spawned the whole town of Swink. So, looking here, this is another one of those postcards, Sugar Factory Swink. This is so very pretty sight when the light, when it's lit up at night. One of the things too it said in there is basically the electric plant at with the sugar factory was also assisting in electrification of the town of Swink. So, one depended on the other. This is another article from the Silver Cliff Rustler on December 6th. Talks about the 10 months and up and running. So that's just I sit back and think of every day that you probably could have sat there and saw remarkable changes just overnight in 24 hours. So it was kind of a miracle. This is a picture taken from the top of the sugar factory looking west onto Sugar Row. The little scale house, the administration building, which is apartments now. The other two houses are there, superintendent's house. So those are all factory buildings. The factory, well, here. Looking down, there was a administrative office, the manager and supervisor's homes were those two. And there were four, in 1910, there were 4 residences on Sugar Row. And you could just see the water tower over there in the left-hand side. This is one of the pictures that came from Ralph Carnegie's Pictures of Swink. So I've got quite a few of those. He was a photographer and a good historian of Swink. So this is a picture of the sugar factory. I showed this at Lions Club years ago, and Leonard Walgren is with the Antique Car Club. He assured me those were not the workers' cars. You know, but it kind of showed the level of executives. Sugar was big money back then. When the sugar factory was buying, or when they had the auction lot, the sugar factory, Holly Sugar, bought several lots in Swink. They built 11 homes. They built and operated the Colonial Hotel. Employees, visitors, everything, you know, it served meals, leased rooms, but it was owned and operated by the Holly Sugar. If you look at the streets in Swink, Columbia Land and Cattle owned land there. Wiley, Holly, Powers, those are all names that are associated with the sugar factory and the operation of it. Then Sugar Row. This is kind of my fun part. I never realized as a kid growing up what all used to happen over there on the other side of the tracks. But the Holly Swink Railroad, Holly made the promise to build that railway from Swink. They started almost immediately building the trestle heading north. They were laying track out of Holly, headed up to Hartman. They let the contract, I don't have a date on it, but it was basically early 1906 that, you know, a 100,000, let's see, contracts when the first contracts they let were for over $100,000, but they thought it was going to cost over $1 million for that piece of railroad. You can see, this is kind of difficult to see there, but Swink, from Red Dot, Swink, going out to Cheraw, and then back around. Well, it was staying all the way out on the north side of the river, and this one gives a little better, a better view there. You ran from Swink out to Hayes, to Shelton, to Randall, Catherine, Cheraw, Buckdale, and Castile was just east of Cheraw. And those were basically beet dumps or some kind of station along that line. There were a gentleman was here at the 2 o'clock presentation, and he requested the schematics or the layouts of all of the AV, well, all the southeastern Colorado railways ever installed. So he's going to provide me with the schematics on all that. So we'll have a list of every beet dump and every stop that there was on there. But I'd heard of Shelton before, and but the others, Rosher from Cheraw.
That's called Castile.
Castile?
Yeah.
And that was east of Cheraw then, right? Okay. But anyway, that's it's hard to believe what used to run through there. And they had plans to do. They were going to run passenger. They were going to run freight. But the main thing was to run sugar beets. There was a Holly Sugar Company and the beet sugar, American Beet Sugar, and there's a movie called The Denver Rio Grande, and it has to do with the battle over the railroad in the Royal Gorge, and it's neat. They got Pat Masterson portrayed in it. And they send a dummy train toward Raton to divert some of the opposing railroad. At night, they're coming in and tearing up the other company's tracks. They're fighting to put tracks through the Royal Gorge. So we actually have our own version of that. I don't know why they didn't make a movie out of ours, but basically, this talks about letting that contract for the railway. The Holly Company, basically it's going to bring about 40,000 acres in. Contracts for 11,000 acres have been signed for beets. Kind of some of the spin-offs of it was the fact that like the Big Bend area on the Fort Lyon, when this all started coming, then they were going to take telephone lines out into that area. So all kinds of development kind of followed the plans for this line, and it was all happening at once. So there's lots of meetings, lots of money being brought forward, and they're working with the Santa Fe because they'd be hooked to the Santa Fe on both ends, making agreements and things. So the Holly Swink Railroad Company, not cowed in the least by gunplays on the bleak prairie, let courts settle it. So that kind of started an introduction into what was being done. A lot of those news articles that are let out, the Aspen Daily paper, whoever wrote for them should have got a raise, because he took the articles and they were always better after he rewrote them. Bloody war is imminent. Battle may ensue between railroad lines, battling rival lines to tap the Arkansas Valley sugar fields. And it says Rocky Ford. A Rocky Ford battle is imminent in the Holbrook district. 7 miles northeast of Rocky Ford, between the grading forces of the Arkansas Valley Railroad Company and the Holly and Swink Railroad Company, which are building rival lines through the Arkansas Valley to tap the sugar field. Both sides are heavily armed and waiting for the word to open hostilities. Only a quick compromise, a powerful sheriff's posse or state troops can avert the bloodshed. It is claimed that Sheriff Stewart of Lahana and City Marshal Baldwin of Rocky Ford with a posse left for the scene of the unexpected conflict early this morning in a swift auto to serve the condemnation papers on the Arkansas Valley Company in an effort to prevent it from crossing the grade built by the Holly Swink outfit yesterday. If the sheriff's order for peace is not heeded, there's talk of calling out the state militia to keep the rival outfits from shooting each other. So, we had lots of drama. CNN would have been all over this. Railroad war in Holbrook. This is from the Atlanta Tribune, February 7th. So, Holbrook is the scene of warlike hostilities Monday morning, and for a brief season, there was a prospect of clash between the graders employee of the Holly Construction Company and the American Beet Sugar Company. Last Saturday, an order was issued out of the county court granting the Holly Construction Company a right-of-way over the land owned by A.W. Shelton. And what it was when Holly contracted or agreed to do this, farmers granted the right-of-way for free to put the railroad through the land needed. In this particular point, it was crossing of both of them. The American Beet Sugar Company went there with a checkbook, and they said, okay, you're giving it to them, but we're gonna pay you. So that caused some contract problems, and it's the basis for all this. On Sunday, the Holly people proceeded to construct their right-of-way over the disputed territory. Across the right-of-way, the railroad would be constructed by the American Beet Sugar Company. Bright and early Monday morning, the American Beet Sugar Company, with a large force of men, proceeded to obliterate the grade of the Holly people, and with armed guard prevented the employees of the latter from interfering. The Under-Sheriff Stewart appeared on the scene early hour in an enclosed automobile with what appeared to be a 14-inch gun in the front and an aft turret. He read the order of the court to the employees of the American Sugar Company, and hostilities ceased instantly. Since then, everything has been quiet along the Holbrook, and both companies have been busy building the railroads as fast as the law will allow. So, I read a lot. There's a lot of different articles and stuff on it. I thought that was the kind of stuff that kind of gets lost and forgot about, but I thought it was neat as hell. So, basically, it continued, but the Swink Holly Railroad Company prevailed, and basically the American Beet Sugar, they ended up withdrawing. So it was, that was kind of the end of it, and they went to building. Now we're talking, you know, that was February of 1906, so that was going on right as the factory was being started. The Holly Railroad had talked about freight, they talked about passenger trains, and the beets. Well, they're running from Holly to Swink. The Santa Fe is already running from Holly to Swink and beyond. So the Santa Fe Railroad determined in October that it would be in their best interest to own that railroad. And so they purchased it on October 12th of 1906. And that became, I guess, basically called the AV line of the Santa Fe. So it was a short life for a corporation. We've got some stuff over here. One of the things I have is the actual corporate seal for the Holly Swink Railroad Company. It was only in business for 10 months, and the corporate seal ended up on somebody's desk in Pennsylvania, and they sold it on eBay. So it came back to Swink. So you know, it's just kind of neat to see those kind of things and have it as part of history. This is something I just came across recently, and it's a reproduction of a postcard, and it's the Holly Swink gasoline motor car. And I have yet to figure out how that kind of fits into everything, but I thought it's pretty cool. So, that's kind of the Holly Swink Railroad part of it. Getting more into beets and the importance of the beets. Will wanted to know if this was the world's largest sugar beet, and that's how we grew them in Holbrook. So, if you've never seen a sugar beet growing, that's a beet. And over there, it's the actual the sugar beet's the seal of the town of Swink. So that was their commemorative coin for their centennial. In 1911, there were 16 operational sugar factories in the state of Colorado. They were broke into 3 different districts. They were the Southern District, Northern District, and the West Slope. The Southern District was Holly, Swink, Los Animas, Lamar, Rocky Ford, and Sugar City. By 1915, Holly, 1915, the Holly plant closed. The Los Animas plant ended up closing, and most of those are smaller plants. The Swink plant was designed and called a 1,000-ton plant, but most of the time during campaign, it actually operated at about 1,400 ton a day. The Holly plant was a 500 plant. The Los Angeles plant was a 400 ton plant. So just a kind of a circumstance of economics. If you've got a plant running, a lower plant like, or slower plant like that or littler, it was more cost effective to close the plant. You had a very efficient railway and beet dumps, and they would pile and load those beets, and they shipped them Rocky Ford, Swink. Those were two factories that basically ran the majority of the beets in the majority of years. They said the 1911 plant or campaign in the valley, it brought in $60 million to farmers. So that was a pretty good boost. The Western Slope plant was actually built in 1899, and it was funded by Becher, Charles Becher. And as you read a lot of these about who financed them, who was pushed and started in them, it's like reading the who's who of the early 1900s in Colorado, because these guys had big money and they put it into sugar, and they turned it into more money. A little bit on the sugar factory. There was about 130 employees minimum is what employed at the Swink factory, but they talked about indirectly with the farmers and everything that worked for them, that basically they were indirectly employing about 1,500 guys. In Swink, they talked about how state-of-the-art, the beet pulp, all that was moved by water. It was real efficient. The Catlin Canal, Catlin water actually had to be, Catlin had to be ran year-round, all winter, because that water was used to move beets and to run the factory. So it's called the factory ditch. One of our farms was on it, and it brought Catlin water into the town of Swink, or into the factory, all winter long. And one of our, I guess he'd be a great uncle of mine, was actually one of the guys hired by the factory to make sure the water kept running in that ditch. They also used well water. There's a string of wells that lie north of the factory that pump shallow wells. Those were huge industrial wells for the factory. One of the other things, they actually had 20 full-time employees just east of Colorado Springs. Part of the process of refining sugar from the sugar beets is the addition of coke and limestone to the slurry, and so limestone had to be quarried. The Holly Sugar Factory actually ran a quarry east of Colorado Springs and mined their own limestone, which was brought to the factories for processing. Lime is a byproduct of that. If you go north of the Swink plant or north of the Rocky Ford plant, there's huge piles of white dust or lime. At Swink, it's 2 to 3 feet deep. Out there in the 70s, it would get to blowing so hard that it shut the highway from a white cloud of dust on Highway 50. So that was one of the byproducts, and it's still there. Originally, when the Swink plant was built, it utilized coal, but it was later converted to natural gas. The picture here is basically where those elevated dumps are. They're dumping those beets off trucks, off wagons, and then they come down, and there's a trough, and water washes them starts them into the plant. They're transporting them with water, and they're also cleaning and washing dirt and rocks and stuff off of them. Here's a picture of those wagons coming in, and the one railroad track here on closest, that's the elevated dump for for the Santa Fe cars that brought them in from the beet dumps. The wagons, we've got one sitting in our front yard, and the trucks were the same way. When the trucks replaced the wagons, but the beds were actually hoisted up and dumped off the side, which I've got a picture over here. Early days, they were shoveling all those beets off they shoveled them on, shoveled them off. That was a lot of labor. Speaking of labor, a lot of the labor was German Russians or Volga Germans. In the late 1800s, the Germans fled from Germany to Russia at the invite of Catherine the Great, with the promise of farm ground, freedom of religion, and they wouldn't have to serve in the military. They were being asked or made to serve in Germany's military, and I didn't realize what a large portion of them were Mennonite. So they moved to Russia and began farming in the Volga River Valley. And it was not a pretty part of Russia, but it was well equipped for sugar beets and farming. And so a lot of those promises that were made in the mid-1800s began to be taken off the table in the late 1800s. So a lot of Germans, instead of going to Russia, a lot of them would come to the US and settled as immigrants. And they corresponded with those that had moved to Russia. And so when those Russian Germans decided to go somewhere, they came to the Western United States. And almost the majority of them ended up out in the Western Plains. If you look at, you can go back and look at the immigrant lists. The sugar companies kept a list of their immigrants that they were bringing in and where they came from, but they had to, when you came into the country, you had to list who your employer was. And there's sugar company after sugar company after sugar company. So they really facilitated the bringing of that labor force in. I guess as I started going through these things, I look at one thing and I find something else that kind of intrigues me, and I ended up going down a rabbit hole, different things. But one of the things was the Russian Germans and how they kind of came in, and they were the labor force in the early sugar beets. And then there's you can read a lot of Japanese that came in shortly after them. And then later after that, it was Mexican labor that came in. So you get these workforces that came in and worked. I mean, did the thinning, the hoeing, the topping, the harvesting. It was not an easy way of life, but I guess it gave a start. One of the documents, or one of the papers I read in Sugar City, apologized for some of the type in that paper, and they mentioned that the printer had run out of V's and Z's and other letters due to the number of Eastern European names. So, that just kind of went to back up the fact. My mother taught in Crowley County for years, and she had a family member, a grandmother, come in. She would talk to the 5th grade about them immigrating to the United States and her family's heritage. And she'd tell them about the sugar beets, and Sugar City, and she'd even sing them a German lullaby. And she said those 5th graders were just enthralled by just sitting there, couldn't get enough of it. And so it's a neat history. This is the Quast place. This is just up the road from me, Fritz Quast. And as you can see, his team is pulling 5 tons of sugar beets. 5 tons and 600 pounds. So fortunately, he's only got about a mile to go to the sugar factory. So his horses are going to be happy. But beets, I guess, were kind of supported by the whole family. Beets were a good part of your farming rotation, but both American sugar and Holly sugar they owned land around the beach, around the factories and stuff. And they would parcel those off into small tracts, and they were rented to sharecroppers, and they were rented, I mean, it was good for the factory, and it was good for the farmer, and sugar beets were very profitable. And that was a start or a leg up for a lot of families. That basically, small families, if they had some beets, and beet acreages, you know, if someone took 20 acres of beets to the factory, that was a huge, huge farmer. Most of the farmers were raising 4, 5, 10, you know, and they were hoed by the family, they were topped by the family, and then that head of household usually went to the factory and worked too. You know, farm labor was about 15 cents an hour. When they went to the factory and worked, the lowest grade paid job at the factory started off at 15 cents. So those were better paying jobs, and their families stayed home and they worked around that farm. So those beets actually allowed, and that farm working on the campaigns, the actual processing time of sugar beets in the factory. So by the head of households, their dads working those, it allowed a lot of those guys to get a start and buy a farm and basically be successful in farming. And you know, if you look around, if you look at the makeup of our community and some of the older families, you can see those immigrants, the Russian Germans, or German Russians, the Japanese, the Hispanics, and a lot of those, you know, you can trace back, and that's how they got here, and that's how they became farm owners and operators here. This is a picture of actual beet harvest. It's all hand labor, and that is this is actually out of a 1904 publication for Rocky Ford. Thank you, Mike. Mike shared this with me, and this was on the back page of a publication put out by Rocky Ford. But I thought it was neat that the Arkansas, or the railroad was saying help settle our valley, and it talked about, you know, we need more farmers in the valley, we need more beet farmers, and we need more laborers. So kind of showed how the railroad, the farm, the factories, they were all in it kind of together. Arkansas Valley beets, and my dad told me this all the time growing up, but now I've seen it on the internet, so it's got to be true. Our beets grown in the Arkansas Valley were higher in sugar than basically anywhere else in the nation. It was you know, we're the best farmers, we grow the best cantaloupes. It's got to be the farming. You know, the percentage of sugar was off the charts. So they easily average 14 to 18 ton, and I mean, that's way on the low end. At $5 to $6 a ton, average production cost $25 to $30 an acre. A minimum, you were gonna, I mean, you could pretty much, if you were not even a good farmer, you could make $40 an acre profit. In 1901, the Grange sponsored a nationwide contest, and it first place was 39.3 ton to the acre, and it was grown by a Arkansas Valley farmer. The Grange offered 25 places in that contest. 15 of them were won nationwide by Arkansas Valley producers. So 15 out of top 5 yields of the nation come out of the valley here. So said in 1904, R.N. Harris and Rocky Ford raised 43.8 ton to the acre, for which he received $219 an acre. $219 an acre, that guy's wife was happy. But even on the low end of the scale of the beet crop, they were making more than any other crop. There's a bunch of beets headed into the Swink factory, and I think that's where my dad got the idea that, you know, the truck isn't full until you throw one on and 2 fall off. So those both are from Ralph Carnegie's photographs. So here's a postcard. And that's south of Swink, so it's got to be somewhere close on Road 24 and a half, between 24 and a half and 24, I think, looking toward town. So, with a sugar beet field. Another postcard. And the sugar beet factories were a big catalyst for boom in agriculture. You know, the beets, it was another crop to go into the rotation. It led to good feed for the livestock, so they fed the byproducts, which produced a corral full of manure, which right back out and fertilized for the crop. And every farm back then had a small feed pen of cattle. They fed the tops and pulp and stuff too. 40,000 acres of beets in the valley, and I think that was about 1910, 1911. So you think 40,000 acres. If you look up and down the valley, now that's probably real close to our corn acres. So we're raising about the same amount of corn as we used to raise sugar beets back then. Can you imagine if we had to harvest our corn today by hand? That was all hand thinned, hoed, topped, harvested. That was quite an accomplishment, I think. Kind of talked about livestock feeding. When you produce sugar, you have byproduct of pulp and molasses. And if you were a sugar beet farmer, you got the factory guaranteed you 20% of the tonnage you hauled in, you could haul back out in pulp. So that was high quality free cattle feed. So back then, like I said, everybody had a small cow operation, a corral with a few head of cattle. They milked cows. Basically, you know, that pulp went to fatten the cattle, took to market, fed your family, fed the milk cow. The cream went to the creamery or down to the depot for the train. The milk probably went in a trough, fattened your hogs. So I mean, it was real self-sufficiency and frugal living, I guess. I won't say cheap living, but livestock feeding. There was pretty much every factory had cattle operations pretty close to them. Swink has the factory, it was Gephardt that ran it then, but it's a broken board now, right? The set of corrals right next to the sugar factory. Rocky Ford had where Ribeye Feed Yard is now, and those were all large consumers of the byproducts. In Fowler, it talks about John Riley, and I don't know the name. There in Swink, we've got some publications that talk about this Gephardt and Sons was one of the most extensive feeding operations in the state, and it's kind of neat because we've got a lot of old pictures from that operation, and we actually own the feedlot there. And there's a barn that has railroad tracks in the floor of the barn. And if you look down here, that was the feedlot train. That train actually backed into the factory. They would load beet pulp, and then in the front, the tank was for molasses. And they fattened cattle on pure beet pulp and molasses. They would see the top picture there. They'd run the train down the alleyways, feeding off into the bumps, and then as they backed back down that, they pumped molasses right on top dressed it with molasses, and they fattened cattle that way. The actual processing of sugar, better than I could talk about it. There's a really good YouTube video if you're interested. But basically, you know, we saw where they dumped them, they brought water in, they moved them with water, they washed them with water, they brown them up, they go them up, they had a knifing station. The knifing station actually chopped the beets up, processed it. Then your processed beets are put into a tank, and warm water or hot water is forced down through the beets while the beets are moved up through the solution. It opens the cellulose cells of the beet and releases the sugars into the water. So you get a sweet syrup. Then they add that's when they start adding the lime and the Coke and through heat. Then they actually add a very, very small sugar particle back to the solution, and that lets the sugar solution to allows the crystallization to those small crystals to allow to turn into big crystals, which they separate, dry, bag, and ship. Well, the lower grade solution after that is the molasses. So they have number 1 sugar, number 2 sugar, and then 2 low grades that are basically byproducts. But anyway, if you'd like to see it, and just type in how it's made, beet sugar on YouTube, and you'll get a lot better explanation than I can give. This was the Holly sugar plant. World War II. This letter actually came out of an attic in Rocky Ford. Guys were working around the house. They found it and they gave it to me. And you know, they say so many men are wanting to work this campaign, and due to the fact that we are obligated to hire former employees that have been discharged from their service, they must be employed in preference to women in this campaign. But there were a lot of women that were employed during World War II, and basically when they came back, they were out of a job. But it was real nice. It was very truly yours. So, but I think nowadays that probably wouldn't go over too well. At that time, it was the situation. I'd never really thought about World War II and the sugar industry and things like that, but it kind of led into some other things. World War II, the beet sugar basically was used for industrial alcohol. It was necessary because they could use that for smokeless powder, solvents, chemicals. There was a war need. So there was actually a campaign to grow more sugar beets in 1945, meet the wartime need for sugar. Then this one was cool. I saw this every time a 16-inch gun was fired, 1/5 of an acre of sugar beets went up in smoke. So you know, there was a patriotic sense of patriotic duty, plant more sugar beets. So that was I'd never realized that. And I was given this presentation for the Lions Club at Swink, and Bob Klinkerman asked me about POWs in World War II working in the beet fields. And so that kind of led me to kind of look up some things. And basically there was 3 large POW camps in Colorado. Camp 202, I think, is what they called the one in Greeley. And it held over 3,000 POWs, and they were both Italian and German. So in Greeley, a lot of those were put out in the fields to do field work, along with the Italians. Trinidad had 2,500. They were also put out, and some from Carson, Colorado Springs were also, they had 12,000. And so a lot of them went out east. They were actually out around Alton, Eaton. So a lot of those were put out in the fields. Kind of a sideline on that was up around Greeley, Fort Moore, that whole sugar country up there. A lot of those were those German Russians that we talked about earlier. So they weren't that far removed from Germany, and then we're sending Germans POWs into those areas. And those German Russians had felt some alienation in the communities. They were immigrants. They had some, they were treated and a lot of times poorly as they worked to come up in communities and things. But they had a real kind of a close relationship with some of those POWs, which they weren't supposed to have, but it just happened. And there's actually a play that was written. It's called Beats, and it has to do with the relationship of a POW and the daughter of the farm that he was put to work on during World War II in northern Colorado. So there was a lot of the German POWs got fed a lot of meals that were very similar, had roots from what they'd left in Germany. They felt well welcomed in northern Colorado. So anyway, just a little sideline that, like I said, every time I open something else and start reading down something, I end up going down another rabbit hole. So let's see, this is basically what the sugar factory looked like at the time of the closing. Pretty close to closing. The two warehouses that Clean Valley have now, you can see these are the rail spurs come in. The rail spurs came in just south, just north of the county, what the county shops now, and part of that was actually in the county shops, or what they had. You can see those were large and could handle a lot of beats. The small dump is part of the original dump for trucks and things like that, but the whole part of the main part of the factory is gone. There's those two large tanks in the back are still there. Those are molasses tank, and of course the tower or the smokestack is still there. They renovated this plant they built it in 1906. It was renovated in 1915 and 1921. In 1926, there was a fire in the big warehouse, and they had just finished sacking 100,000 sacks of sugar, 100-pound sacks of sugar. And there's an article over here on the table, and after we're done, anybody can peruse the articles and pictures and things. But it talks about the La Junta Fire Department had an American LaFrance fire truck, and it sat there for days running the pumps. All they did, they stopped at every now and then, checked the oil, added fuel, and started up again. So the oil it talked about the sugar flowing, not actually, it burned and flowed, so I'm sure it was a mess, but today we can't even tell on the buildings that it had happened. 1959 was the last campaign. 1970 was the last close for Rocky Ford. Since it closed in Swink, it's been used as a scrapyard, fertilizer storage. Dean Foods, Western Foods used it for storage. It was used for onion processing, and then Clean Valley ran it. The Holly Sugar, after they closed this, they went on to operate plants in western Colorado, Nebraska, and Wyoming. But its big success, it went into Southern California. And they had a plant in Santa Ana and one in Huntington Beach, and they were huge. They ended up having 11 more factories in Wyoming in the 30s and 40s. They ended up moving into Texas and Montana. Holly became the largest independent processor of sugar beets in the country. Colorado Springs, as a kid, I can remember the big building downtown Colorado Springs had the Holly Sugar on the side. In 1989, they merged with Imperial Sugar, And then in 1997, they left Colorado Springs and moved their headquarters to Texas. So that was kind of the end of that of Holly Sugar in Colorado. Couple of sidelines again. This was the Holly Sugar advertising. This was in the 50s. Some of the characters, Will, do you know, do those look like characters that you recognize? Do they look like Dr. Seuss? Actually, Theodore Seuss, before he did children's book, he was a cartoonist commissioned for Holly Sugar. So he did all the old ads and things. If you happen to run onto an original ad of his, the last one sold for over $30,000. So if you can pick it up at a yard sale, you know, off the dollar table, please do so. Let me know. I'll give you $2. This is kind of pretty much the end of my presentation. One thing I will show is this is the newspaper website that I like to. Anything you have, if you have a historical question about Colorado and you want to get the news perspective of it, you can type it in there, and you can find anything in there in Colorado. So the other thing I guess I always try to tell people is, you know, the more that we know about history, or the more I get to know about it, the more I appreciate it. But every day people are dying that they know things that we don't know. They haven't shared, we haven't documented them. Family pictures, things like that are just getting put in boxes and thrown away and things. So every day we're losing things. And I think a lot of this is going to be harder with the internet. I mean, I think it's going to be harder to go back and find. I mean, we may be able to read articles, news articles, but we won't be able to remember what Grandpa said about this, or you know, Grandma came from here on a wagon and things like that. So, you know, we need to do what we can of documenting these, getting people to talk and listen and write it down, or get them to write it down, because someday our kids, our grandkids, our great-grandkids, they may actually want to hear about these things. So anyway, any questions? Yes?
Could you go back to the slide that had the newspaper information on it?
Oh, yep.
Try to get a picture.
And actually, if you I think, like, if you Google Colorado historic newspapers,
Okay.
it'll pop up.
I was going to say, in that one picture, Swink,
That one?
yeah, I noticed there's a number of water towers that they had numerous water towers in the area.
Well, this is the one that's right by the community building, behind the community building. And then this is the one that's still right along the highway. Yeah. 3rd Street in Swink. Cabreas lived now. This was Pete O'Neill's house for years. It was the last house on the street there. This is the rental house for the school, and there was a well in a public. They sold water. You know, you can fill up your water tanks and haul. This is a picture. The school actually came and they were trying to find the location of the cistern and the well. It's right in the middle of the playground. And they weren't sure where it was. They were able to use this picture to find it. That's 3rd Street, so this is 4th Street in Swink. So there's about 2 blocks that have been added since that picture. Again, you can look north of what will be the highway, but it goes just to where you can just see the road crossing the river there. So, but I had a great uncle who was mentally handicapped, and he would tell me about milking cows that were in the field right next to the schoolhouse, because there used to be a dairy somewhere real close there. But he could remember exact locations of everything around town when he grew up as a kid. And I was like a third or fourth grader. I should have took a lot better notes.
You mentioned something about a livery stable and stores. Where basically in that picture were they located?
And I've got some pictures in my boxes over here. Basically, the livery stable, the Hanagan brothers had feed, coal, ice, and things. It was right in here. Like in this picture, this is the apartments. Right next to the highway there were bungalows, and then right next to that there were two sets of Mrs. Marshall's cottages. Marshall's cottages were right across the street from what's the gas station now, and then between them and the post office there was actually another set of little motor court, little rental buildings, and then the post office. Where the restaurant used to be the drive-in. Back then, before there was a pool hall, it was. We took the paint off the front of the post office about a year and a half ago, and the paint just came off, and you could see the old advertising. It was a cafe, and I took some pictures before they painted back over again. So they talked, some old newspapers I've got over there talked about Swink was thriving. They were going to have a theater, a bowling alley. They had plans for all kinds of stuff. The Swink, there was a roller. They used to have a roller rink, a skating rink over by the log cabin where the Frito-Lay warehouse is now. There was a blacksmith shop over there. I would like to find a picture where the little community garden, the garden is right there along the highway. There was a hamburger joint there. Too many people took it. I guess it was a drive-in, and they actually had some drive-ins. So, trying to think of what else was businesses.
So where's Highway 50 in relation?
Highway 50, it runs right along that line. You can see that's the railroad track. Runs right through there.
Okay.
This here, that's the railroad line going out over the old trestle to Holbrook. This was a section house. That, I believe that's the depot sitting right there on the railroad. And there's pictures of the depot over there too. And I don't know, Dad, do you know when they tore down the depot?
About the 60s.
The early 60s. So, yeah, I can look for hours and just dig through stuff. Like I've got stacks of papers and articles and things like that. So hopefully one of these days we'll have a place that people can actually come look.
You notice on Main Street of Swink here, the business part of it, how wide it is, and then it gets narrow down there, and the trees on both sides, you could drive down there and it was just a kind of canopy. And it was really a beautiful street.
I think a lot of those trees that were taken out when they put
They had to take out all the trees to replace a ditch that went down through there.
there's an underground irrigation ditch from here that runs north of the railroad tracks. And when they did that, they took all those trees out. But they talk about how they used to just canopy. It was like driving through a tunnel. And at one time, right where that about where that mill, right close to there is where the Hanigans had their implement company, wasn't it, Dad?
What?
The Hanagan implement, wasn't it right in here?
It was right on the top side of the highway.
Okay, right there, yep. Kind of where the Just Fish,
The implement place was across the north side, and the hardware store was on the south side.
the place where there used to be Kate's dance studio, now it's a dog training academy. Before it was Kate's, it was a Buddhist church. And before that, and you used to be able to go into the Buddhist church, you see the big walk-in safe, because it was the First State Bank of Swink, I think. I've got some old checks, blank checks from it, but it was the bank. We have a map that shows all of the Japanese businesses. The Yagamis were very good friends of our family, and my great uncles, one of my great uncles was on the naturalization board, and one of my other great uncles, his brother was Mr. Yagami's sponsor for citizenship, and they left us a lot of their photos and information. But we've got a plat map that shows all the businesses. There was a lot of there was a Japanese grocery store, Buddhist church, a barber shop, all kinds of Japanese businesses in Swink.
Was there a school, a Japanese school in Sweden?
There was, the historical society's done some work, and they showed one as being out just to the west of Swink on Road BB. I talked to Shiro from Crowley County, and he actually grew up just where the new street in Swink, Kimball. Right across from Kimball, Gardner's have a center pivot, and there's an old gravel pit used to be in it. He actually grew up and went to school at Swink, and he said that the Japanese, when he went to school in the basement of the high school. So, but he said they were separate, and I mean, he went to Japanese classes. And of course, that's the old schoolhouse. So we've got a picture or a newspaper of it's the first newspaper from the town of Swink, and it's got the four high school graduates on the front page. So, anyway, feel free to browse through anything that's over there. If there's something that you have a question about, I may have something in a pile that I can show you. But anyway, if you ever have a group that you'd like to have this or just a general Swink, we'll drag our junk out and show anybody. So,
Right across here, so right where she's pointing, that one, right there, that's the lumber store. Like your house is right on the other side of it. But like the location.